piece of advice you would give any president when they walk in the Oval Office for the first time?
Tell the truth.
And his controversial opinion of some of the GOP candidates.
Gingrich in the South Carolina debate, I think he has that subtlety of racism that I know quite well and that Gingrich knows quite well.
Jimmy Carter and his wife Rosalind. For the hour, the Piers Morgan interview starts now. He was president from 1977 to 1981, but his work since then has won him praise worldwide and a Nobel Peace Prize. His latest book is Through the Year with Jimmy Carter, and tonight I'm privileged to sit down with President Carter and his wife Rosalind, who will join us later. Mr. President, thank you for welcoming me to this extraordinary centre.
It's good to have you at the Carter Center. We're delighted.
I love the dates here. So you became president in 77.
Yes.
CNN is launched in 1980.
Yes.
The Carter Center is launched in 1982.
Right.
So we're all kind of interwoven here. The Carter Center is unusual in the sense that most ex-presidents went for a big library and that would be the way they would do their work. But this center is really extraordinary. I mean, just walking around the library is really a small part of it. You've got all these different areas covering all kind of global charities and things that you support and stuff. What was the overriding concept for the center?
To promote two things, human rights and all of its ramifications, and also peace. And we started out just trying to negotiate peace between people, and we still do that. But I think now about 80% of our total budget goes in curing diseases or preventing diseases that afflict hundreds of millions of people in Africa and Latin America, but don't touch rich countries anymore. We also monitor elections. We just did our 89th election in Egypt. We're still going on with that. We just finished in Tunisia, and this is a major part of the Carter Center's work.
Do you feel that you've achieved more outside of the presidency than you did when you were there?
Well, that's a different kind of thing. You know, I couldn't have brought peace between Israel and Egypt. I couldn't have normalized diplomatic relations with China if I hadn't been in the White House. So those two things might have momentous historic significance in the future. But it's a much more human, intimate relationship with literally millions of people. For instance, last year we gave treatment to prevent blindness to over 12 million people. And we have now just about eradicated a disease called guinea worm, which was afflicted 3.5 million people. Now we're down to about 1,000 cases. So we're almost on the verge of doing away with this disease. And, you know, I couldn't have gone to Egypt and participated in detailed meeting with all the political parties and monitoring the election if I'd been in the White House. So it's a much more personal, intimate relationship with people who are in need than it could have been when I was president.
Do you think you get a bit of a bad rap for your presidency? And the reason I ask that is if you look at the achievements and you look at the Egypt-Israel treaty, which has stood to this day, you look at the way that you brought America back into relations with China, the most pivotal relationship now that America could possibly have. Just on those two things alone, pretty big ticks in the box, weren't they?
Well, they were, and we kept our country at peace. We had a lot of challenges, a lot of opportunities, a lot of advice that I had to start another war or attack somebody. We didn't do that. And so we not only kept peace for ourselves and promoted human rights, but we brought peace to other people and formed alliances. China's the most important one, with other countries that had been estranged from America for 30 years or so.
You've just been in Egypt. And obviously this has been the most extraordinary 12 months. When you look at the Middle East and Egypt in particular and the repercussions for Israel and surrounding countries, what is your sense on the ground there? Because the big concern is, after all the euphoria of a year ago, that actually the Islamists are taking control in Egypt and that this could be very worrying.
Well, we have to remember that Egypt has about 90% Muslims. And for Muslim political parties to be elected is no surprise. And I think that the Muslim leadership, with whom I've met extensively during this past week, are very determined to put on a good face for the rest of the world and to show that the Islamists can govern effectively and fairly and honor human rights. It remains to be seen, of course. One of the things that's important to realize is that the United States is now recognizing the right of the Islamist parties to form a government.
When you saw people like Mubarak being deposed after 30-odd years, Gaddafi killed and so on, I mean, extraordinary times.
Yes.
The kind of thing you couldn't have even imagined 5 years ago. Did part of you celebrate and the other part slightly think, okay, what's going to happen now?
Well, both. There was a celebration because democracy had come for the first time really in the history of Egypt. and some trepidation about the future because it's unpredictable, as you know. And I think a lot of what happens in Egypt and also in Tunisia and also in the future in Libya and so forth will depend on the attitude of the United States and European countries toward the new government. Will we support them and say these are the primitives on which we will give you financial assistance and also give you economic and political support, or will we try to do away with them just because we don't like the leaders who have now taken power? I hope that we'll reach out to them with a friendly hand, give them help, and let them have a chance to form a good government.
Well, what should America's role be?
I think to promote democracy and freedom. And that is what has happened in Egypt. They have a chance now for a democratic government chosen by the people, and they have a chance for freedom, that is to have all the human rights that normally go with a free society. And in the past, we haven't always done that. For instance, there was an election in Palestine in 2006 in January when the Muslim government won. The Hamas won. And in advance of that, we had supported Hamas and supported their candidates. But after they won the election, the United States said, no, we can't let them take office. So we declared, after the election was over, that they were terrorists, and we forbade them to take office.
Was that a mistake, do you
I think it was a serious mistake. We would probably have had peace in the Middle East if we had recognized a newly elected government and worked with them with support. But this is what we have now learned in Egypt, and I think we'll do a different path and give them a chance to govern.
Israel is understandably pretty twitchy about what's going on. You know, I interviewed Prime Minister Netanyahu, and he took me to the map of the region, showing these big countries, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Iran, and so on. And then he put his thumbprint on Israel, and you got a sense of the vulnerability they feel. You've always been criticized for being more pro-Palestinian than Israeli in the conflict. Do you think naturally that you are?
No, I don't. If I had one constant prayer the last 35 years of my life, it would be to bring peace to Israel. And because I know about the Holy Land, I've taught lessons about the Holy Land all my life. And, but you can't bring peace to Israel without giving the Palestinians also peace. And Lebanon and Jordan and Syria as well. And I believe that this is still an opportunity for the United States and Europe to play a positive role in bringing about a peace based on all the international agreements. That is, Israel withdraw to the 67 borders with some modifications negotiated to allow the big settlements to stay right near Jerusalem.
How much was your view slightly coloured by the fact that you've said that whenever you met Menachem Begin, he would always refer to any Palestinian as a terrorist?
Yes, he did.
And I might be wrong here, but I kind of got a sense that when you heard this repeatedly, it instilled your determination not to portray every Palestinian as a terrorist, and perhaps lent you to move slightly more to their side in people's eyes. Would that be a fair comment?
I don't think so. When I first went to Israel, about 15% of the Palestinians were Christians. And they were my friends, and they were my soulmates in the worship of the same God in the same way. Now they've almost been removed from Palestine because of some pressures and encouragement from the Israelis. So the Palestinians, I think, are human beings, just like the Americans and just like the Jews in Israel are. And I think they deserve a right to govern their own territory. And their own territory is Palestine, which has been defined by international law as the West Bank and Gaza and East Jerusalem. And there can be some modifications to that, as President Obama pointed out in May of last year. But Israel has to realize that they will never have peace unless they basically withdraw from Palestine and have two governments side by side. That is the two-state solution. And the two-state solution is what the international community all unanimously endorses. And in the word of mouth, at least, Prime Minister Netanyahu says we want a two-state solution. But their present
policies... Do you
think
he means it?
I'm not sure. Their present policies are leading to a one-state solution, which I believe in the future will be a catastrophe for Israel.
To the Israelis who say that you don't fully, I guess, feel their pain of being on the receiving end of the suicide bombing and the attacks and so on, what do you say to them?
I don't have much chance to talk to the Israeli leaders anymore, but the last time I was over there, I did meet with the Speaker of the House, and I met with the Deputy Prime Minister and also the Mayor of Jerusalem. So I still talk to some leaders. But I just encourage them to treat the Palestinians fairly and to honor international law and to realize that Israel can be a strong, safe, and recognized country by all the Palestinians if they will go back to the 67 borders. And that's the only solution, I think, in the future. But I love Israel. I've been there many, many times. I have many friends there, including Menachem Begin, who was my close friend, and many other of the prime ministers. But I think the current policy under Netanyahu departs dramatically from all of his predecessors, including his most recent predecessor, Olmert, whom I knew quite well. He's recognized Palestinians' rights to form a government side by side with Israel. I'm not sure that Netanyahu will do that under any reasonable circumstances. I hope he will.
You brought this amazing peace accord between Egypt and Israel. How much of this is down to individual personalities, leaders, who just get it? And do we have the right people in charge of Israel and Palestine? Are they the people that you could have done business with as president?
Menachem Begin, when he was the first elected, had a terrible reputation as against peace, against any accommodation, absolutely rigid in his policies. In fact, he had been branded by the British government before that as the #1 terrorist in the Middle East because when he headed the Irgun group. But he came around because of persuasion by me and because of persuasion by Sadat and because he knew what was best for his own country. And the peace agreement that we worked out, the Camp David Accords, had two major facets. One was no more war between Israel and Egypt. That part has been honored now for 30-something years. Nobody's violated it. The other one was equal rights for the Palestinians and a withdrawal by Israel from Palestine, which Menachem Begin agreed to. And also the Knesset in Israel agreed to. And the United States agreed to, and Egypt agreed to. That part of it has not been carried out. And I believe that's still an integral part of the future process. But I'm very close to the Israeli people, and I want very much for them to have peace, along with peace for their neighbors.
Let's take a little break, come back and talk.